Has it been the best AGRF ever? Very good, very good, very good. Thank you so much. I wanted to recognize that for the first time since the AGRF started in 2010, we do have key delegates from outside the continent that we thought were important to have here. We have a delegation from China that I wanted to recognize. We have a delegation from India led by the Minister of Agriculture. And we have a serious delegation from Israel that was supposed to be led by the Minister of Agriculture, but because of the holiday, he couldn't come. But the delegation is here anyway. So I wanted to recognize that. So based on what we said at the beginning, that this was going to be a great AGRF, I just wanted to go through a few things. Just to recap, we had a great start with the launch of the Africa Agricultural Status Report, and it was really highly appreciated, and I appreciate the teams that were behind that work. We did have lots of meetings in the last 2 days, lots of bilaterals in the last 2 days, and I do feel that in terms of business, in terms of engagement, again, it's been the best AGRF ever. We do have, and I'm counting, we do have over 2,800 people at this AGRF. And believe it or not, we capped our Rwandan numbers to a minimum. So it's not that they are Rwandans, no, it's people who wanted to come to Rwanda, and they really wanted to appreciate the effort the government has put into making this country an appealing country for people to come to. There's a lot. There's the visa. You know, you don't need a visa to come to Rwanda. There's the Golina naming ceremony that was happening at the same place that we all wanted to go to, but we couldn't. There's lots of things that were happening, but more importantly, there's this conference destination and this conference place that has just made our life and our work so easy. I also wanted to appreciate the work we've done with the Ministry of Agriculture and Animal Resources. The minister has been amazing, and her team have been with us from the very beginning and are still with us. I was asking her if she has a room at Radisson, because she's here. Every minute you turn around, she's here. So we really wanted to appreciate. So this is just the beginning of the most important day of the AGRF. Today, we have an opportunity to have some of the people who care about our development but haven't probably had their say yet. So we are going to have an incredible panel of leaders in the development sector that are going to be talking to us about how they see things going forward. We will then receive heads of state and government led by His Excellency and the President of Rwanda, and we will then be talking. I mean, every time you see me dressed like this, you know the President is around. So, so the President of Rwanda and other heads of state and government will be discussing some of the things we'll really be taking some of the discussions we've been having here to a high level. Remember yesterday, the call to ministers was like, don't just sit there with the frustration, take it higher. Let's have this conversation at the highest level possible. And our heads of state and government will be discussing some of the things we are talking about with regards to how agriculture can be that sector that will galvanize our economies. I wanted to end on one note. How many of you actually saw that this conference facility was green last night? How many? Put up your hands. So this conference facility turned green last night in recognition of the African Food Prize and the African Green Revolution. So thank you again. So am I proud to be having this conference in Rwanda? Of course I am. So thank you. Thank you, ministers, and thank you for your support. Let me hand over back to Valerie to take us through the day. Please listen to our presidents. Let's have the opportunity to really take this conversation that we've had. Later we'll talk about the communique, but more importantly, I wanted to mention, because it actually came at the very beginning, I wanted to mention that whatever we say here, we track. So next year we'll be talking to you about the progress we've made since we were at this AGRF. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kalibata. And as we keep moving forward, looking to track and staying in the theme of AGRF 2018, continuing to lead, to measure especially, and to grow African agriculture. Now we're going to move to a panel, Dr. Kalibata announced it, with leaders from around the world that are really driving the conversation, but also the work around global partnerships to invest in agriculture, global partnerships to transform agriculture, global partnerships to learn more from each other around agriculture. And these are partnerships that are both north-south as well as south-south. So to engage in this panel, to share what is happening around south-south as well as north-south partnerships, I would like to welcome the panelists for this session. We're going to have a discussion for approximately 35 minutes before we are joined by the heads of states and heads of government. So it is my pleasure to welcome this morning's panel, and I will start by calling Mr. Andrew Mvumbe, the Executive Director of the World Bank. I would also like to call Honorable Wu Hongyao, CPC Leading Group from the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs of the People's Republic of China. I would like to call Professor João Bosco Monte, the president of the Brazil-Africa Institute. I'd like to call Dr. Naoko Ishii, the CEO of AGRF. And I would like to call Dr. Stefan Smith, the head of Rural Development and Food Security of BMZ, the Federal Republic of Germany. Good morning to all.
Good morning.
How are you?
We are good.
So it's been an interesting 3 days to which you have all contributed and shared some of the major initiatives and partnerships that you're currently engaged in. I would like to perhaps start with both Stefan in terms of BMZ and talking about the role that the EU has been playing in terms of its commitments around partnerships and the role of Germany, particularly in looking at North-South partnership around agriculture in the continent. Could you share a bit what those partnerships look like and what they're bringing in to agricultural transformation?
Thank you very much. Good morning, all protocols observed. Europe and Africa are partner continents, not just geographically. That is why we are embarking on an effort, on an ambitious effort to reach new dimensions of cooperation and partnership at the political, social, and economic levels. African states are on its way to a one Africa. The formation of a continental free trade area is a tremendous step forward. Europe supports this. We see this as a formation of a great partnership. This is an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, provided that there is enough education, enough employment, enough income. We are working on that through new initiatives on training and job creating and combating hunger. Germany has been committed to combating hunger and malnutrition for many years. With our One World No Hunger initiative, Germany has significantly increased its financial commitments and improved the modes of cooperation towards fruitful partnerships. We prioritized our engagement. Since 2013, we invest 1.5 billion euro per year in the field of nutrition, food, and agriculture. This is 20% of the entire development budget. This allows us to put the topic high on the global agenda. Under the German presidency, the G7 decided to lift 500 million people out of hunger and malnutrition. During our G20 presidency last year, the Compacts with Africa was established. And we launched a very ambitious initiative on rural youth employment. Today, the EU and Germany are the leading donors in the field of rural development, next to the US and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I can't remember how often during the last days I heard the phrase, if we want to make progress in the development of Africa, we have to start in fields of agriculture. I totally agree. Those who invest in the labor market in rural areas earn 2 to 4 times more income and employment per invested dollar than in other sectors. But we know each of us can only make a little difference, but together we can make a change. Sustainable results can only be achieved if we work together with many partners. We need to join forces. I personally serve as chair of the steering committee of the Global Agriculture and Food Security Program, GAFSP. This is one excellent example on how international cooperation can work and how joint forces can happen. That also means go for multi-sectoral approaches. The key success factors are investments in agriculture that go far beyond increasing yields. The management of natural resources, diversification of production, incomes and diets to increase resilience are also crucial to combat hunger and malnutrition, and so improve, ultimately, rural livelihoods. That also means let's not just talk about farmers and not talk about small and medium enterprises. Let's talk with them. That is why, from our perspective, civil society is so important. They need a voice to empower these people that are really necessary to make a change. So last year, the Cotonou Agreement will expire in 2020, so there is also change on the EU level. We are in the middle of our talks on an agreement to follow up. That shows the catalytic role of official development assistance, African solutions to African problems. We as donors are happy to give support. It is not our agenda, it's the African agenda. And that is in line with the Marshall Plan in Africa we launched a few months ago. It represents a concept that goes far beyond development policy. It brings together economic, financial, trade, security, legal, environmental, and health policies. Ideas and innovation need a place to grow and a beginning, and this beginning is in rural areas. Those who invest in the labor market in African rural areas earn 2 to 4 times more income and employment per invested euros than in other sectors. Let me just remind it once again. And I believe the only way to predict the future is to build it together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. I would like to have a chance to come back maybe after the others have intervened, particularly to ask how are you measuring it? There's a lot of work that has been done. There's a lot of partnerships that have been developed. There's a lot of successes. But one of the themes of this forum is lead, which you're doing in many ways, but it's also measure. So it'd be interesting to talk about the ways in which you're measuring that success. On that, I would like to go to Dr. Naoko Ishii to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing around replenishment, because one of the things that he has said is really about financing this process and the investment that is being made by different partners into this process. So if you could speak a little bit to what Jeff is doing around the support to agriculture transformation in Africa.
Okay. Thank you so much, and very good morning to everyone. I'm extremely thrilled to be here with you today, and particularly with this very interesting panel on my right. Big player in the food system, the big producer of global key commodities, Brazil, and big consumer and growing, China. And then that we are here to focus on Africa. So these are big players in the food system, and I just want to congratulate Agnes to get congratulations to get these big guys in this room. That is very, very helpful, and to make the conversation absolutely lively. The GF has been engaging with China and Brazil, and of course Africa, for so long in the food and land use system. And particularly for the last few years, we have pushed very strongly this value chain approach. We're taking the comprehensive value chain approach to our engagement in the food system. In order to transform the food system to sustainable one, we really need to take a look at the stage of the entire value chain, from farmers to the producers, to buyers, to traders, then to consumers. And we try to see that where is the weakest link of that value chain to make it sustainable, and we, together with you, want to work on it. And I'm particularly thrilled with the current work ongoing with a big supplier of those global commodities. Some of you are here in this room, but also in Brazil, we have several serious engagement to how to greening that supply chain of those big commodities. And here, not only Brazil, as a producer of those commodities, and some of you are also producing, but here in China, that China can play a very, very critical part as actually the consumer, the buyer of those big commodities. So we are here that today together, the every important partner to make that the food chain much more greener, cleaner, and transformative. What's so interesting, this forum, and particularly this panel, that we have a representative from Africa. This forum is absolutely focusing on Africa. Africa continues to be a kind of a sleeping giant, if I may say, but it's a giant for tomorrow. You have a tremendous opportunity going forward. The demand for food for Africa is projected to be higher than 300%. So what do you do to the food system in this context, continent really decides that the future of your continent, but also the future of the food system and future of our planet. If we can bring the Africa into this global food chain business in the most sustainable way, it's going to be absolutely powerful. The three giants, China, Brazil, and the African continent, could really decide that the shape of the global food system, and you can feed not only the world growing population in your continent, but the global demand, create the wealth and job and wealth in the African continent, and it really addresses that the SDGs not only in Africa but globally. You can really also maintain and rebuild natural capital you have at your hand. One thing I was so pleased in attending this forum for the last 2 days is I hear, maybe surprisingly, that a lot of echo coming from agriculture minister to recognize how important natural capital is for the health of the food system in Africa. That was really the music to my ears. We, at the GF, Global Environment Facility, also strongly committed to do our part. That's why I'm extremely pleased that the GF is now launching a new program of $500 million grant resources for food, land use, and restoration program. This program has actually 3 components in it. We really want to focus on how you put the comprehensive land use planning before you start anything, or before we start anything together. So comprehensive land use planning is the key instrument, particularly if Africa continue to expand in beyond the existing areas. But also that we would like to promote multi-stakeholder approach that Germany just also mentioned, how important that for us to bring the community, women and youth together, the farmers, smallholder farmers, but also the entire value chain, the business. And I also hear for the last 3 days the importance of science, so science-based knowledge, which is fit to each of the context, is absolutely important. And of course, national and regional government play a significant role. And we cannot really ignore the role of the business, not only domestic business, but also the global business. That's why we have this extensive partnership in this room. So that how we could utilize and promote more of this multi-stakeholder platform approach. So that is the second important component. And the third one, as I already mentioned, let us invest in that health, in the natural capital in Africa. These are 3 important components to make this the program which we are actually offering to you to work for the sustainable future of the food system in Africa, but also elsewhere. So my hope is that through this new program, we can work hand in hand with those 3 giants of the today, the giants of the tomorrow, to transform the entire agriculture and the food system for the health of the people and the planet. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ishii. And one of the things that I appreciated is announcing new programs that are continuing to reinforce, as well as BMZ, the partnerships that are being established and starting forward and continuing to do that. Also appreciate your call to really be mindful of sustainability, which has been part of the conversation this week, as well as one thing which will lead me to ask His Honorable from China to speak to us. You talked about the giants and the major role that they're playing, and Dr. Kalibata also mentioned how it's great to have a delegation from China at this AGRF. Honorable, one of the things that has been clear over the past few years has been that we've witnessed a lot of cooperative projects in agriculture between Africa and China. These have also drawn the attention of the international community. What is the direction and the priorities for future cooperation with the government of China? I think everybody would like to hear what is your vision and what are the priorities of the government of China.
好，大家早上好。感谢主持人的提问，同时也感谢主持人对中非农业合作的。
One second, Honorable. Just I will let you know the translation is not active from Chinese, but I will be giving you the key points from what the Honorable will be saying. Thank you.
中国是世界上最大的发展中国家，非洲是世界上发展中国家最集中的大陆。发展是双方面临的首要任务，脱贫是双方关注的重要议题。所以中国有句老话，叫“民以食为天，国以农为本”。农业作为一个基础产业、民生产业，在保障经济社会发展、促进人民福祉、消除贫困方面发挥着非常重要的作用。中非双方开展农业合作，是携手共同发展的题中应有之义，是合作削弱贫困的必然要求，符合双方的共同利益，可以说是南南合作的典范。根据您的提问，我首先介绍一下2006年首届中非合作论坛北京分会以来中非农业合作的情况。一是通过建设农业技术示范中心，集中展示农业科技技术。目前，中国已经在埃塞俄比亚、南非、苏丹等19个非洲国家建成20个农业技术示范中心，同时正在另外4个非洲国家规划建设农业技术示范中心。通过示范中心的建设，实现非洲农业品种与中国的农业技术、中国的农业品种与非洲的环境的有机衔接。二是通过派遣农业专家积极传播实用技术，中国农业农村部共向35个非洲国家派遣了66个农业员外 专家组和农业支教组，累计派出519人次，传播新兴农业技术100余项，为非洲农业发展提供了坚实的技术支撑。三是通过加强能力建设，为非洲农业发展储备专业人才。中国农业农村部在境内外共为非洲国家举办337期农业培训班，累计培训非洲学员6260人次，有不少学员已经成为所在国家的农业发展的中坚力量。四是通过南南合作，增加对非农业合作资源。中国与联合国粮农组织以及有关非洲国家合作实施了南南合作项目，以使非洲国家近100万小农户从中获利。FAO 总干事多次公开赞赏中国是全球农业南南合作的领军者。五是农业投资贸易稳定增长。2017年，中国与非洲农业贸易额达到60.2亿美元，其中中国自非洲进口29.4亿美元。良好的贸易关系也为中国企业赴非洲投资创造了有利条件。截止到2017年底，中国企业在非洲投资超过500万元以上的项目共有117个，遍布非洲2/3以上的国家，投资存量达到148.3亿人民币。就在本周1、2，2018年中非合作论坛北京峰会成功召开。在峰会上，中国国家主席习近平宣布了一系列中非合作的新的举措，标志着中非进入了构建更加紧密的命运共同体阶段。借此机会，就落实北京峰会涉农的举措，简要谈谈我们的初步考虑。一是强化顶层设计，制定未来农业合作的蓝图。中方将与非方共同编制中非农业现代化合作规划，确定未来中非农业合作的重点领域、目标任务、重点项目和实施的路径。二是加强机制建设，推动中非农业合作有序发展，建立中国非盟农业合作委员会，打造中非农业合作论坛机制平台，扎实推进中非农业全方位务实合作，进一步提升合作的层次和水平。四是坚持授人以渔，帮助非洲国家提高农业自主发展能力，利用中非农业机构、科研机构10+10合作机制，有效整合中非双方资源，密切与国际组织，包括非洲绿色革命联盟在内的非政府组织的合作，加强对非技术研发合作和人才培养，提高非洲自主的发展能力。四是致力于打造平台，推进中非农业务实合作，建设好在非农业合作示范园区，鼓励和引导双方实力强、信誉好的企业落驻园区，从事农业生产、农产品加工和流通，促进农业全产业链合作，带动非洲经济社会发展。同时，通过园区平台，为非洲培养一批有技术、懂市场、会经营的农业致富带头人。谢谢。
Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Honorable. I'm aware that many of you were not able to get the translation, so in about as much as I can do in 1 minute, and I know I will not do justice to everything that you've said, but His Honorable was referring to the future direction of Africa-China cooperation, which is really around demonstrating the Chinese products and technology that they've acquired through Agricultural Technology Demonstration Center, focusing on sending Chinese agriculture experts to promote extension of the technology, build capacity, and train human talents. Through South-South cooperation mechanisms, also bring more resources to Africa, which is part of the future direction of the cooperation. Finally, ensure that China-Africa agriculture increases stably, and this is definitely part of the notion of grow that this conference has been under. There's also, as we know, the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, which has just happened in this last September, and the President of China spoke about key points which are about strengthening the strategy planning for Africa-China cooperation, building additional mechanisms to be able to frame this relationship and especially continue to build capacity. They have, for example, a 10+10 initiative, which is where 10 universities in China are pairing with 10 universities in Africa. And finally, building a platform such as Agriculture Demonstration Center and Industrial Park. So some of the key things, and I'm sure this is not exhaustive, that the Chinese government is working in terms of their cooperation with Africa. Thank you, You're honorable. Again, if you allow, I would like to come back to you in a minute, if time allows, really to talk about one of the things that's been key in terms of the China-Africa collaboration has been around the role of China in supporting the SDGs as well. But I'll come back to you in a minute because I would like to go to the other giant, as Dr. mentioned, and the other giant being Brazil. And to ask you, Professor, what are for you the key elements that must be at the basis of Brazil-Africa relationships, and how are you, through the Brazil-Africa Institute, contributing to the tightening of this relationship and to improving the cooperation that is happening south to south, just as China is doing? Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Of course, in 20 minutes or 35 minutes, not easy to work or to talk about this engagement of Brazil, Africa, China. But first of all, I think it's important for Brazil to know what Africa are we talking about. Because the concept that we have in Brazil about Africa is not the right concept. I keep saying to Africans that you should go to Brazil to let us know who you are. Because 54 countries is not easy to put together in one single space. And I keep saying to Brazil that we should come to Africa to understand what is Africa about. But I'd like to say something that I keep saying to Brazilians. Africa is a profitable place. You can make profit in Africa. And I keep bringing Africans to Brazil to see the potential of the cooperation. And also, I lead some Brazilian business people to many places in Africa to see how the engagement could be possible to achieve. And I see results, good results. And I remember in 2003, when the former president of Brazil, Lula, said that Africa would be a priority for his government, Valerie. In fact, he meant it. Since that time, many Brazilian business people came to Africa to see the engagement, not only the Portuguese-speaking countries, but other Africans. Other countries in Africa start to come to Brazil to dialogue, to diversify the conversation with the private sector, but also with the government. I represent the Brazil-Africa Institute, which is an NGO which is linked to promote the engagement between the two regions. People would like to say that the Atlantic Ocean divides the two regions, Brazil and the continent. And I keep saying that the Atlantic, it's a connection, and we should find bridges to put together the two sides of the Atlantic Ocean. The Brazil-Africa Institute is one of the bridges. What we do is not easy because, as I said earlier, we need to understand what's the size, what's the dimension of Africa. If we put together different countries in one single space, we need to understand what is the potential of communication and also engagement. But there is one thing that I'd like to put at the beginning of this conversation, and this is a conversation, and I'll be talking with people during these 3 days. I'd like to take the opportunity to congratulate the organization of this event. Put more than 2 people together is not easy, and we have 2,800, which is a good number. And I see that the result that we can find after 3 days of discussion is something that we can concretize. Brazil is not so far to Africa, but we need to put people together. In the last 10 years, I see the market, Brazilian companies that are coming to Africa to invest and to do business. And I received so many requests of African companies to engage with Brazil. I give an example. I was in Cameroon 3 months ago, and one gentleman who works with soybean, He said, listen, I need to have seeds from Brazil because I know Brazil is good in seeds. We have Embrapa, which is a well-known, recognized as a research institution. So I want to buy seeds. Okay, Brazil is good to seeds. And then I gave him some ideas and where he could go, what door he could knock. But besides the seeds, you have the technology, but also you need to have the management. I see Brazil and Africa so close, and that there are two words that could be combined, solidarity, and yesterday I was talking to a friend and she said affinity. So the engagement of Brazil and Africa, not just for the cultural aspect, historical aspect, but also the dimension of market. So I think we should bring more people, and I was sorry to see in this audience private sector from Brazil. So for the next edition of this AGRA summit meeting, I would like to see more people from the private sector to talk with private sector from Africa as well. Because government it's good. I used to work for the government and we talk too much, but sometimes we do not act too much. So it's about time for us to engage people who is actually on the ground, changing situation and bringing good solutions for rural areas, but bringing options for local development. So this is not easy to engage, to combine, but I think that's the beginning of something.
Thank you. Thank you, absolutely. Now I'd like to talk about the view of the World Bank. And it's great to have so many partners and key partners of the continent that are bringing not only their expertise, but their experience and their history to share with Africa's expertise and history and experience as well. And I would like to come to you, Mr. Mvumbe, to talk about some of the financial flows. What does that actually represent in terms of the cooperation, in terms of the partnerships, and what can we do to make sure? I think some of them have alluded to that, even started with Stefan Smith around the African agenda and how this cooperation is really fitting in an African agenda, if there is such a thing as an African agenda on agriculture.
Well, thank you very much. Let me first of all acknowledge the tremendous efforts which have gone into this preparation. Excellent. We congratulate Rwanda and AGRA for this. And secondly, for us as a World Bank, we're delighted to be here to discuss and be a partner in this conversation, which for us is really long overdue. As African executive directors on the board representing the 54 countries, we have been pushing for agriculture to take its rightful place on the agenda of the World Bank. And we've seen tremendous response from the World Bank in terms of prioritizing agriculture, the transformation of agriculture. Now, for us, I think partnerships in our relationships are our DNA. We prioritize partnerships. We realize that if we don't have credible, true partnerships, our ability to achieve our twin goals of eradicating poverty and boosting inclusive growth and shared prosperity will not be able to achieve those two twin goals. So we are the largest multilateral development institution, but still we feel we need partnerships, true partnerships. Now, for us, what does it mean? It means having shared vision. I think that is critical for us. And also that partnership should be transformative. It should produce transformative results on the ground and change. And then thirdly, it should also be based on structured work plans and also on real results. Results frameworks are very critical for us. So this, I'm happy that we have been discussing these in the theme, the issue of lead, which comes into the vision. I think this is important for us. And we are delighted also that African heads of state have taken the leadership in this very critical transformative agenda, and we welcome this. And then the issue of measurement for us is critical when it comes to the results framework. What are the results on the ground as well? And we really welcome the CADEP framework, the results, the scorecard from CADEP. But I want to come in on that just quickly. The CADEP for us, I've looked at it. I've seen some very disturbing gray areas where there's no data. And I think this is something we have to look at also as the World Bank to see how we can assist to make those gray areas, to make them red or green or whatever. So I think it's fundamental for us, the issue of results measurement and impact and the results framework. And also what is important for us is really the issue of impact and change, where we link it now to the grow aspect. Africa is to grow, and we can only grow with results on the ground. So for us, we have put together so many partnerships. There are too many to mention. But I think for us, our partnerships resolves on knowledge sharing. We have a wealth of knowledge within the bank. And then secondly, it revolves around resource mobilization. We play a catalytic role, a big catalytic role in terms of resource mobilization. And I'll give you an example. Recently, our IDA 18 replenishment, we were able to catalyze private sector resources to result in the historic replenishment of IDA 18, with most of resources going to Africa and focusing on fragile and conflict states, and also focusing on agriculture. One of the areas which we have recently been involved, I'll mention some of the partnerships we have. We are in partnership with AGRA, as you are very aware, where we are focusing on smallholder farmers. We also recently partnered with the African Development Bank, IFAD, on the Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation Institute, TAT. That for us is very critical. It dovetails with what we are talking about here in terms of the use of technology. We are partners in Grow Africa. We are partners also in the consultative group on international agricultural research, which for us also is very critical. And then we have one other, which I'll mention, the Global Agriculture and Food Program we call GASP.
Thank you.
All those partnerships are really there to support this program. Yeah. But my plea, I think, going forward is we'll need definitely to rationalize all these initiatives and partnerships so that we can solidify and concentrate and prioritize. Yesterday we talked of prioritization, and I think for us this is going to be fundamental for us to achieve what we are talking about.
Okay.
And also for us, the other critical issue is the issue of lessons learned. Because for us, it's about knowledge, and what have we learned from what we're doing, how can we improve, how can we work together, how can we work smarter together going forward. So those are some of the fundamentals guiding our partnerships, and really we are very delighted that we are looking for true partnerships, and we have seen this evolving with AGRA.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for sharing what you've been doing around partnership, which is amazing to see that these collaborations are still as solid as ever. And all of you have been doing it for quite some time, and historically as well for some of the partnerships. I've been allowed an additional 10 minutes, so please allow me to poke a little bit and to push a little bit beyond the statements that you shared, because some of you have raised issues that have sort of gotten me thinking. I'll start with you right here, because you mentioned some gray areas. And you say we need to take them to red. Can you specify what are the gray areas that we're still struggling? Because one of the key things here has been the evidence-based policy. And that is important when we talk about measurement and having enough content to be able. So can you cite 2 or 3 key gray areas in terms of our knowledge base that makes it difficult to assess impact?
Well, as we were discussing, we can have a credible policy framework. But as we look at the scorecard, I was really amazed to see, even at policy level, in terms of policy focusing on agricultural transformation, I saw quite some reds, and so at policy level as well, we still have to get it right in some countries. And then also, in terms of impact, I think to me this is much more critical to say our partnerships, our intervention, what are the results what is the real feel on the smallholder farmer? How do we measure that impact?
Do you do that? Does the World Bank do that? And do you have key indicators to say over time and making agriculture a priority for the World Bank, one key impact that you have seen or that you have been able to track? And I'll come back to the rest of you for the same question, so get prepared.
For us, for instance, for smallholder farmers, the issue has been productivity. Mm-hmm. Now, we have to come up with tools and frameworks to measure productivity, mm-hmm. and we have focused on areas like the hectarage in terms of the outputs, the yields. Mm-hmm. That is one instrument we are using. And in terms of the details for the frameworks for each project, these go down to the finer details in terms of granularity, in terms of what are the yields, what are the results framework in greater detail per project. Mm-hmm. So for me, this makes much more sense for the smallholder farmer than the broader targets which we have within the scorecard. The scorecard is good, but in terms of impacting on lives and livelihoods of the smallholder farmer, I think we need also to be granular and go deeper and have a deep dive on our targets.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I've just been told that the heads of states are on the way, and I really would have liked to sort of push a little bit to talk particularly around the smallholder farmer, because the partnerships only serve to the extent that they actually change the lives of people that we are meant to be able to support. And these partnerships are amazing, and the ability to measure to what extent those partnerships and also the investments that governments themselves are making in addition to these partnerships as a key mandated to lead this transformation would have been great. But unfortunately, we're not able to continue. But what is sure is that the rest of the panelists, the heads of state panel, and some of the statements after will address that. On that note, I would like to ask you all to help me thank the panel for these great partnerships. Your Excellency, Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda. Your Excellency, Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo, President of the Republic of Ghana. Your Excellency, William Ruto, Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya. Your Excellency, Emmanuel Izoze Ngondet, Prime Minister of the Republic of Gabon. Excellencies, Delegate Representative of Heads of States from Mozambique and Zambia. Your Excellency, former President Obasanjo. Your Excellency, former Prime Minister Tony Blair, members of the Diplomatic Corps, all AGRF partners and sponsors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Good morning, bonjour, welcome again to this AGRF Presidential Summit. Your Excellencies, for the past 3 days, over 2,000 delegates have spent time in Kigali discussing agriculture transformation. The focus of this particular theme has been around leadership, measurement, as well as growing our agricultural potential, as well as making sure the conversation shifts from poverty to creating wealth, that the conversation shifts from where we are today to actually seeing a true revolution in our agriculture that is the source of not only income, but also work for the majority of us Africans on the continent. One focus of this discussion has been around leadership. It has been around the leadership systems and the commitments that come with this leadership system. But beyond the commitments that are made, how do we make sure that the commitment actually also leads to implementation? We've had great conversation. We've got great partnerships that have been made. We have looked at how to increase accountability, and accountability at all systems of the leadership structure, not just at the highest level, which is needed to drive agriculture transformation, but also within all spheres. We've looked at the responsibility to lead, and which has drawn us in, even in the hashtag of this conference, how will you lead? And asking every single one of us, wherever we sit, whether in policy-making roles, whether at the highest level of leadership, whether as a farmer, as a private sector actor, or as other policymakers, what is our individual role, as well as our collective role in leading, in making sure that we follow a collective vision, that we develop that collective vision, that we move from that, as the Honorable said yesterday, from the vision to the policy, to the people to drive it, as well as to the performance management, which we know the Republic of Rwanda has been a great example and a leader in that process. It is our pleasure to welcome you all again today for a great program that we'll have. We will start with a few interventions by first showing you an inspirational video of what AGRA is about. We will then go to a few of the interventions that will be followed by a panel that I think every single person in this room and watching has been looking for, which has been hearing from our leadership around the continent for how they are doing things, some of the lessons, and how we can continue under your leadership, Your Excellencies, to continue to drive agricultural transformation. My apologies. And on that note, I would like to invite you with me to watch the AGRF 2018 video around Lead, Measure, and Grow for this presidential summit.
Son. Yes, Papa? My generation had just a bite of the success agriculture could bring. We had many challenges, but things are getting better now as agriculture moves from a struggle to survive to a business to thrive.
But Papa, how is that possible?
Our leaders appreciate that progress as usual is not enough.
What do you do with agriculture that the big majority of our people depend on? We focused on crop intensification, so technology, seeds, better use and better management of land and use of water resources, and then organization, including cooperatives and so on and so forth. This has given us the good results.
Indeed, progress as usual is not enough. That is why governments, the private sector, and entrepreneurs have stepped up to ensure Africa can produce high yields and nutritious crops, consistently and profitably, to meet the continent's growing demand for food.
5 dernières années, nous avons plus que doublé le revenu des paysans et des producteurs dans le secteur agricole.
Entrepreneurs are helping to meet Africa's nutrition and health agenda aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. In Rwanda, this push for entrepreneurship in agribusiness is exemplified by the Africa Improved Foods Factory, which sources its inputs from local farmers. There is only so much that individuals can do. Donors, partners, and other non-stakeholders need to accelerate investments that increase the viability of agribusiness in Africa. In addition to investment, it is important to shore up our resilience to enhance the food systems that support and improve agricultural productivity. This is because climate change is causing unpredictable weather, unexpected pests and diseases, and other shocks.
Farmers are asking for early maturing varieties that are also adaptable to a wide range of environments, resistant to abiotic and biotic stresses, low moisture levels, that is drought, and so forth.
Papa, why didn't you grow this farm?
I had big dreams. Big dreams need money.
But couldn't you get a loan?
Now you can. Back in the day, that was a complicated issue.
Institutions are seeing the future and realizing that innovative financial solutions make farmers bankable and profitable.
We are investing $350 million of additional loans to farmers in the next 2 to 5 years.
Papa, I see your vision, but how will I achieve such a great task?
What you need most is people to help clear the way for young, willing men and women like you to realize your dreams.
Farmers have already shown that they have the ability to make the most out of farming. What they need is structures that are designed with their success in mind.
We want and are working towards achieving food and nutrition security by 2022. We most importantly have to empower our farmers with the information necessary to increase their output per acre, to reduce their unit cost of production, to reduce their post-harvest losses, and therefore significantly improve returns on their investment.
Countries that have met the policy targets set in the AU's Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Programme are enjoying the significant economic benefits that agriculture offers.
The Assembly requested to institutionalize a system for peer review that encourages good performance on achievement of progress made and recognize biennial exemplary performance through awards.
Papa, I see great things happening. But can one country really change an entire continent?
No, son. And Africa's leaders know this. That's why they are signing agreements that allow collaboration and easy trade across Africa.
We must lead. Leaders across various sectors will set examples of success that we can emulate and uplift our countries. We must measure. Evidence will clearly show us what is working and how we can do better for the people of Africa. We must grow by increased opportunities through agriculture.
Papa, it's all clear now. We know what we must do, we know how to get there, and we must do it now.
The future of Africa depends on young people like this, who are taking the mantle, driving the agenda, and leading our agricultural transformation.
How will you lead?
We must lead, we must measure, and we must grow. The theme running through this AGRF 2018, and it's going to be the theme of the next 2 hours as well. As I said earlier, you will have the pleasure of hearing from our leadership, both in terms of keynote as well as a great panel, but we're also going to be awarding young people that themselves have been leading through this process as well until we finish. We have a great program for you, and for that I will start by saying that looking forward to hearing as much as you all here. I'll be running you through the entire program under the leadership of some great panelists, but also some great moderators of these panelists. My name is Valérie Traoré again, the Executive Director of NIEL, and to kickstart this presidential forum, again, I would like to invite Mrs. Strive Masiyiwa, who's the founder and chairman of Econet Wireless, as well as chair of the AGRF Partners Group. Please help me in welcoming Strive.
Good morning, and welcome to Kigali. I hope you love this place like I do. Your Excellency, President Paul Kagame of the Republic of Rwanda, Your Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, President of the Republic of Ghana, Your Excellency William Ruto, Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya, Your Excellency Emmanuel Ise Ndonset, Prime Minister of the Republic of Gabon, Your Excellency President Olusegun Obasanjo, Your Excellencies, delegated ministers, distinguished dignitaries, AGRF partners, sponsors, youth, entrepreneurs, farmers, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Kigali. I am delighted to be here on behalf of the AGRF partners. As the chair of AGRA, we are partners with a number of institutions that host and organize this forum in different African capitals. This year, we are delighted to be here in Kigali, in a year in which Rwanda also took up the leadership of the African Union. Your Excellency, I thank you for accepting to host us. We in the AGRF Alliance do not take for granted the process that you took to be back here, all of you, from China, to be able to host this, showing your commitment to agriculture and the future of this continent. Once again, thank you. I was not supposed to be the one who was to open this forum this year, as you know, because our chairman emeritus, Kofi Annan, had specifically agreed to come this year. He always wanted to attend these conferences. And my last conversation with him was about the trip to Kigali. We would meet every year before the conference and discuss the details of the meeting, what were we to discuss, what was the progress. Sadly, he is not with us, and I would beg your indulgence that we take a moment of silence on his behalf. Thank you. We will not tire until we have achieved the vision for the African Green Revolution that he laid for us. As we move forward, I'm amazed to see how AGRF is steadily evolving into a platform which all of us see as the platform for advancing our shared aspirations. This year, Your Excellencies, is the largest AGRF forum that we have ever held, both in terms of the delegates, the number of nations that are participating. We have delegates here from every corner of the world, Your Excellencies. And it is not a coincidence that we are represented by the President of Ghana, because that is where we went to begin this journey. And that was where we held our first AGRF. Your Excellency, thank you for making the effort to come. Your Excellencies, let me reflect, if I may, just briefly on our mission. The mission that set us on this journey. When you, as the leaders of this continent, got together in Maputo, that led you to declare the declaration that we've now come to know as the Maputo Declaration, saying that the time had come for a green revolution in Africa. That decision was echoed by Kofi Annan as Secretary General of the United Nations. And he declared that as this would become his mission once he stepped down. And so a number of us got together. At the time, I was on the board of the Rockefeller Foundation. We quickly began to mobilize around his leadership to create the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. And we stress the alliance because we realized then that it would be impossible to carry out an African green revolution, which was not African-led, African-based, using African skills. But we needed our friends and our partners. It is not a coincidence that one of our great partners during his time of his leadership, Tony Blair, is here with us today. We welcome you. We appreciate the work you did all the way back to Glen Eagles. You have been a great friend of this continent. Thank you, sir. But we have so many other friends, the donors that are working in the agricultural sector. You will recall at our meeting in Nairobi last year, President Kenyatta called for us to seize the moment and called on all partners, whether they be industrial groups, whether they be donors, to step forward and to tell us what commitments they could make. We closed that day with extraordinary commitments because I thought, to be honest, that if we hit $10 billion of people telling us their commitments, we would have done well. In fact, I was a little embarrassed not to even use the word 10 billion just in case we fell short. We didn't fall short. Commitments declared that day hit $40 billion. By the end of the year, when we went to Abidjan, the number increased and hit $60 billion. There is something going on out there. Our young people are beginning to turn their heads, and they're beginning to see agriculture. They are beginning to realize that we cannot have a paradox of which the average age of our continent is 19, but our farmers are approaching 60. We cannot allow a paradox in which 70% of our farmers are women, and they do not have access to land, and they do not have access to resources, and they are ill-equipped for the job to feed a growing continent. So the young have heard the call, and that call has gone across this continent, Your Excellencies, and we are seeing extraordinary movements across this continent. We now need to harness that energy and take it forward. At this gathering, Your Excellencies, we have heard some extraordinary testimonies of what is beginning to happen on this continent. But I will not take your time in those deliberations, because I know that there are many better equipped than I to take you through that. Mine is only in my capacity as chair of AGRA and as chair of the Alliance Group, for which I have been privileged to do ever since this forum began, except for the very first one. It is my last one, so it allowed me to express my appreciation. To express my appreciation, first and foremost, to the African farmer. As in my capacity as your chair, I traveled up and down. I took off my techie boots and sometimes became a farmer and saw what it takes to grow food that we eat on this continent. My appreciation and my salute goes first to the African farmer. I want to appreciate the African leaders. If there's been an area where there's unanimity that this is something whose time has come, it is in agriculture. Your Excellencies, let us continue to roll up our sleeves and to put in place the mechanization in our systems to ensure the success of our mission. His Excellency President Obasanjo was here with us. He has had to step out. Allow me to thank him as well. He came to Ghana, to that very first meeting. We used to chuckle in the background and say him and Kofi Annan were like twins. But that day he reminded us that he really was a general. And I'm old enough to remember. But he said, I'm a general, and I'm putting out this command. The issue of food security in Africa must end by 2030. We have 12 years to go. We have to speed up our game. So, Your Excellencies, my appreciation to the farmers, to their organizations, to civil society. We know today we can not do our work without the urging and the pushing of civil society. We acknowledge you, we thank you for your efforts in your work. Our appreciation to the young people, the entrepreneurs who are beginning to rise up to the challenge of agriculture in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, thank you so much for attending. I know many of you have come from across the world. If I were to shout you out today, we would spend the whole day. But you know who you are. You're our partners. You have stood with us, whether it is you are a global agency or simply a good friend of Africa. Thank you. God bless you. Welcome to Kigali.
Thank you so much for those words. Now a moment we've all been waiting for, that I've also been waiting for, to welcome, to hear his remarks, to hear about his leadership, to hear his words on African agriculture. It is my honor, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome on stage His Excellency, the President of Rwanda, Mr. Paul Kagame.
Excellency Nana-Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, President of the Republic of Ghana, Excellency William Ruto, Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya, Excellency Emmanuel Isoze Ngondek, Prime Minister of Gabonese Republic, Excellencies, former heads of state and government, former President Obasanjo, who is, was here but now not in the room, Honorable Tony Blair, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Strive Masiwa, the chairman of the board, AGRA, and AGRF staff and supporters who are here, many heads of international and regional organizations, including Vera Songwe, Gilbert Ongbo, honorable ministers, leaders in business, distinguished delegates. Mine will be a simple but also very important job, and that is expressing my pleasure of having you all dignitaries here in Kigali attending this forum. So I'm happy to join you on this final day of what has been a busy and productive week of meetings for all of you. We are honored to serve as host for the 8th African Green Revolution Forum, and I thank the organizers for choosing Rwanda as the venue. You are once again most welcome, and we hope you will have time to stay longer and visit some other parts of our country. Agriculture is the cornerstone of Africa's prosperity and of our children's health and nutrition. This sector is not only essential for survival, it drives everything else that we are trying to do in terms of human and economic development. The majority of Africans still earn their livelihood directly or indirectly from the land. Agriculture, therefore, deserves the concentrated attention of Africa's policymakers, scientists, and entrepreneurs. Fortunately, we know what works. The knowledge, experience, and goodwill in evidence at this forum shows that we have everything we need to succeed. It is up to us, working together, to drive the necessary change in our respective communities and organizations. Allow me to share a quotation from the late Professor Kalistu Juma, a great African innovator and scholar, and also a friend to many of us about the way forward. Quotes, sustainable agriculture needs to be recognized as a knowledge-intensive, productive sector that is mainly carried out in the informal private economy, end of quotes. The agricultural innovation system must link the public and private sectors and create close interactions among government, academia, business, and civil society. You are continued in the courts. Let me offer a few thoughts along those lines about making African agriculture much more productive. First, at the national level, we must cultivate the political and scientific leadership required to create an enabling environment that will unleash the enormous potential of this sector. Better coordination within governments is essential, and so we are much stronger, and so are much stronger links among policymakers, scientific researchers, financial institutions, and investors. We have to make sure that Africa's farmers are getting the most out of the many good partnerships that have already been set up in this ecosystem. Second, revitalization of agricultural extension services is urgent. We have to do a better job at mobilizing citizen farmers and treating them as clients. They need the latest skills and services to increase their productivity and better manage risk. This will also serve to make careers in agriculture more attractive to young people and more profitable as well. Third, the private sector is absolutely central. Even as more African governments achieve the levels of public spending agreed in the Comprehensive African Agriculture Development Program, we know that most funding for agriculture is already coming from the private sector, not from government. This is a significant trend which will only continue to increase thanks to enormous new opportunities for trade in agricultural commodities created by the African Continental Free Trade Area. Fourth, we must sustain the continental commitment to measuring progress and results using the African Agricultural Transformation Scorecard, which was successfully championed by former Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn, who was also earlier attending this forum. We thank him. This is an invaluable tool because it keeps up the pressure to deliver to citizens. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, we require a rapid shift in the mindset of our young people towards agriculture as a career choice. With the knowledge and technology available, there has never been a better time for young Africans to get involved in agriculture and agribusiness and create wealth and well-being for society as a whole. Once again, I welcome you and thank you very much for your kind attention.
Your Excellency, if you would permit, we would like to ask you to stay on stage as you're going into a panel. So if you would please, thank you for those words. Thank you very much. Would you please, in the middle? Yes, thank you. As you will be joined by your peers, your other colleagues, may I now call on to Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Ghana, Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo, please. May I also call on you, Your Excellency William Ruto, Deputy President of Kenya. Your Excellency Emmanuel Isoze Ngondet, Prime Minister of the Republic of Gabon. And to moderate this presidential panel, may I call on Your Excellency, former Prime Minister Tony Blair.
Very much, Valerie. So this is great for me. I get to ask the questions rather than answer them, which I'm sure is a lot easier. So their excellencies have already been introduced, and is it all protocols duly observed or something? Whatever is the right. Anyway, I don't need to introduce everyone again. So we've a reasonably short time for the panel. Let's try and get through as much as we can, excellencies, if we might. And what I'd like to do is start with the first question, which is, you've all got experience in government now. In the agriculture sector, what in your country would you say is a success? You know, if you could say one thing that's really working. And second, what is your biggest challenge in meeting the objectives that His Excellency President Kagame has just set out in his speech? And if I take it in the order, Your Excellency first, the Prime Minister of Gabon, sir.
Yes, Mr. Blair, the issue of agriculture in Gabon is very essential. Gabon, in the last decades, based its development program on oil. Nowadays, President Bongo is deeply convinced that the future of Gabonese development lies on agriculture. All South, the share of agriculture to the national GDP is low, almost 3.8 or 4%. But we have around 15.4 million hectares of arable lands. And among all this land, it's only 450,000 hectares which are directly exploited. You could be convinced that we have a huge opportunity, and we are lucky to have an equatorial climate. This is very important for agriculture. The President instructed the government to launch a very huge program named Grain Program. The Grain Program is essential. The objective is to increase the level of the national products, to reduce the volume of import of alimentary products, and also to increase the volume of our exportation. To reach, the target of the government is to reach almost $600 million per year. So we launched this program in year 2004. Those 2 years now we are experiencing it. Some results are positive, but we have also some constraints. The positive results is we already create some jobs, around 1,200 direct jobs. We create almost 800 cooperatives. We issued more than 2,000 land titles, and the production is increasing. But we are facing also some constraints, dealing with the level of rural infrastructure, the lack of processes plant, and the lack of financing.
We are working at the level of government to see with our partner, Olam, how to open the shareholders to the independent private operators, how to secure funds. Recently, we granted a loan from ADB, almost around 100 million euro, which is used to assist this program in view to accelerate it. We do think in the next 5 years, we could satisfy the demand, the national demand, and we could start also to export our alimentary agricultural product abroad.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Your Excellency, Deputy President of Kenya, so your one success, one big challenge.
Thank you very much, Tony, for this moment. And I bring you greetings from the President and the people of Kenya. And it's always a pleasure to be in Rwanda. I will agree with Strive that Rwanda is a great place. Agriculture contributes 25% to the GDP of Kenya. Agriculture with its linkages contribute 52% of our GDP. Agriculture employs 70% of our population. Agriculture contributes 60% of all our foreign exchange earnings. So to your first question, agriculture plays a very central role in the economy and the development of Kenya. We have a mixed bag of successes and challenges. We are largely a commercialized agricultural sector, especially on the export end, and that is where we have a competitive edge. But responding to the statement that was made by President Kagame, we still find that there is scope. And that is why President Kenyatta last year, launched the Big Four in Kenya. The Big Four is the program that we intend to run with as a government for the next 5 years. And the central pillar, or the first pillar of that Big Four program, is 100% food and nutrition security. And the target here is to improve the productivity of our farmers and improve the productivity of our farmers. The target is, we've already done a survey of all our soils, and we want to make sure that fertilizers are going to be targeted so that we avoid leaching, we avoid acidity, we avoid reduction in production because of the use of wrong fertilizer. And therefore, we have expanded the whole of that scope. We have mapped the whole country. We now have a soil survey for the whole country. And now farmers can get fertilizer that is crop specific for specific regions. The aim here is to increase productivity of our farmers. We have to reduce post-harvest losses. We have to increase value addition so that we can enhance incomes of farmers. With this plan, we intend to increase the daily incomes of farmers from $4 to about $6. We intend to increase our overall income from farming by about $4 billion. And we intend to increase our agro-processing value addition manufacturing component by about $1.3 billion. That is the scope we are looking at. And that is the plan that we have. And we have targeted specifically about 4 areas that are supposed to drive that agenda. We intend to increase by 20% from 60 million to about 75 million square meters of hide, skin, and leather. We intend to increase our production in cotton from about 300 or 290 specifically metric tons per year to about actually 9 times that, about 3,000. And we intend to increase the whole area of pyrethrum because we have a competitive edge on matters to do with pyrethrum. We intend to increase it from 300 metric tons to 3,000 metric tons. The other one was bales. We intend to increase cotton from 290,000 bales to about 3 million bales. So the whole of that area, finally, is to find out how do we use agriculture or enterprise farming so that farming becomes a factor for generating jobs and a factor for generating incomes for farmers.
Thank you.
So that is the scope in which Kenya is focused.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Mr. President Kagame, before I come to you, by the way, I think I speak for everyone here when I say this has been number one, this has been a brilliantly hosted conference, and number two, nobody's surprised. So thank you very much indeed for making us so welcome here. Mr. President, for you here in Rwanda, success challenge, how does it look?
Yeah. Well, for us, it has been a long journey, and I try to capture it in a few words. One, as we all know, agriculture has been very central to livelihoods and the economies of many African countries, actually all of the African countries, including Rwanda. But the main thing has been, much as it is like that, I've found, for example, in our own country, which might be similar to other countries as well, not sufficient attention was being paid to agriculture to actually match that centrality of agriculture to people's lives and economies. I quickly give you a story, and the success we've registered so far is also changing the mindset, the understanding, and therefore aligning the importance and centrality of agriculture with actions, and therefore measured towards the results we get out of that. But just to give you an interesting story, I remember when I was still very young, a kid, in fact, I mean, as a refugee, not in my own country at the time, there was a slogan, and I used to listen a lot to Radio Rwanda, even from my refugee life in a refugee camp. And there was always a song and a slogan centered on saying, I translated it, it was in Kinyarwanda, but I translated it in English, which meant that everything is agriculture. Agriculture is about everything. All the work that has to be done has to be agriculture. The rest is just good luck. This is what. But now, when at the time, of course, I could not dream that I would be the one sitting here meeting the challenge and trying to. But what I'm trying to say is when we got into government, I remembered that slogan and the story and the song. And I said, but if they said that everything was agriculture, then where is agriculture? What were these people doing other than just singing and slogans? I don't see anything, because we found largely subsistence agriculture, and even then, actually the situation is getting worse, because you would find, because we are very densely populated here in the country, but you find, so we have farmers having very small pieces of land, and they remained with small pieces of land. You would find on 1 hectare owned by a family, they are trying to plant about 5 crops on 1 hectare. And they end up with nothing of each. But every time they are just trying and trying. So we had to really start from just making it clear to our own people that, yes, one, we agree with everybody, agriculture is very important, but so must we pay more attention to what can be done even within the limited resources, whether of land and other resources, and get something out of it. So we had to start, identifying. Instead of putting 5 crops on 1 hectare, why don't we choose 1 or 2 that can do best there, and we try as much as we can. Or next step, why don't we consolidate small pieces of land and start doing something? So in search of how best we could focus on agriculture and make it more meaningful, more productivity in this area, and get moving, we had to deal with this understanding. They had the understanding of how important agriculture is, but we did not share what needs to be done even within our limited resources to improve that, to actually give it a meaning. So we have succeeded in that. We made, so the challenges that continue to exist today are in the area of resources. There are always going to be insufficient resources to put to good use. Of course, you also continue to have limited knowledge, understanding of what can be done in any particular situation that develops. So education has to continue, then at other levels, research, as we were even told yesterday, so that this information of what needs to be done at whatever time to meet whichever challenge, whether it is diseases that affect crops or better crop varieties that can help farmers, and then that communication and the resources that need to go into that, we may find that's not sufficient, but it's something we understand. We only have to keep looking for possible ways of tapping into the resources outside even of our own country, especially working with the different institutions, groups that exist that have been very helpful in improving agriculture. Many of those institutions represented here in this room. So I think it's been a good story, very challenging from the beginning, good progress, continued challenges, but it's a good story. We can now tell where we are coming from, where we are, where we want to be, and the possibilities in between of where we can tap into what needs to be applied to give us good results.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you. Your Excellency, President of Ghana, so you've made agriculture one of the major parts of your government program, and it's excited a lot of interest across the continent. So how do you see now you're, was it 2 years, I think, into the presidency? How do you see what's working and what's your biggest constraint and challenge?
Prime Minister, thank you very much for the opportunity. First of all, I have to thank President Kagame for the excellent hospitality. I have to agree with Strive. Coming to Kigali is always a lot of fun. Yeah. We're grateful for the hospitality. And also, coming here is always for serious matters. The last time I was here, we came to sign the agreement for the establishment of the Continental Free Trade Area. And then this time it is for a subject as important as agriculture. So Kigali occupies a very important place in my mind and consciousness. I have also perforce to add a few words to what Strive said about our iconic compatriot who was gone. Kofi Annan, as you know, was a Ghanaian, and I think it would be remiss of a Ghanaian leader not to say something in his memory, especially since he had so much to do with the establishment of this whole institution now. The uniquely African Green Revolution was his idea. So next week, we're expecting his remains on Monday in Accra, and then on Thursday, the 13th, we're going to give him full honors and to send him off. So it's a pity that the occasion when I'm here, he's not here to support me, but there it is. I think the question that you've asked, what has been success? What are the challenges? For me, the success has been essentially about policy. Because when you look at where we were before we came into office, and then what has happened since, it is largely because the policy has been properly aligned, in my view. The 3 years before we took office, Ghanaian agriculture grew at something around 2.5% per annum. You're talking about a country whose agricultural profile is that it is essentially smallholder farmers. 95% of those involved in Ghanaian agriculture are smallholder farmers. And we're talking about smallholder farmers who are dealing in 2 or 3 hectares of land, essentially family owners. 2 or 3% of growth. In the country where population growth is at 3% per annum, then you know what is happening. You're talking about deepening rural poverty, which has helped in the acceleration of the migration of our youth from the villages to the towns, with all its social and other pressures that implies. And largely because there was a failure of policy. Some easy indices of that. The value of food imports in Ghana between 2007 and 2016. In 2007, it was $350 million value of imports of foods that we grow in Ghana. 10 years later, the figure had gone to 2.2 billion. An explosion in food imports. 2.2 billion is the amount of money we earn from our principal foreign exchange earner, cocoa. Right. So the amount of money we earn from cocoa goes to paying for our food imports. And if you have that kind of situation, you know there's a serious problem. And it is a problem of a failure of policy. So what we decided to do to revive Ghanaian is to devise a program which we call Planting for Food and Jobs. This is a program that is anchored on 5 main pillars. 1, essentially supporting agricultural production. 1, supplying improved inputs, seedlings to our farmers, subsidizing fertilizer, Fertilizer is being supplied to farmers under the program at 50% of their market. For the poorest farmers, they have the opportunity to pay 25% upfront and the 25% after harvest to give them that space. We have a marketing strategy in place which is based on the buffer stock idea, with warehouses that have been strategically located around the country. We then also have got an e-platform program which allows us to monitor both the delivery as well as the performance of those. And these have been the essential pillars. We're devising also financial instruments that would enable farmers to have access to credit. The most important of which is the one that is being done with the collaboration of the Bank of Ghana. The Bank of Ghana is establishing a fund, some 500-odd million cedis, which is roughly over $100 million, which is going to act as a sort of insurance for the commercial farmers, banks, to be able to give out loans at reasonable rates to the farmers. So this is the package of measures that have been put in place. And they've had a dramatic impact already on yields. Maize, which was yielding, 2 metric tons per hectare, is now gone over 3. Cocoa, that was Ghanaian cocoa, when you compared it to Ivorian cocoa, 450 kilograms per hectare. In Ghana, 1,000 kilograms per hectare in Cote d'Ivoire. We're bridging that gap. We're now also focusing very seriously on establishing a really secure and reliable supply of fertilizer. So far in Ghana, we're employing something like 12 kilos of fertilizer per hectare. That's low, way below the average of, even within the ECOWAS region, of 20, global average of 150. They say in China, 250 kilograms per hectare of fertilizer goes in there. So that is also part of the policy framework that is being designed. And the end result of it has been a significant increase in agricultural output and productivity. This last year, was our first year in office, 8.3% was the growth of Ghanaian agriculture.
Right, so that'll impact your import substitution.
Absolutely. So this is why I'm saying that, for me, the most obvious area of success has been the policy making and implementation. Major constraints, the obvious one, of course, is budgetary. To support this program of planting for food and jobs, we were able to squeeze out some 450-odd million cedis, which is just over $100 million. Woefully inadequate. We still have to pay the suppliers, etc. Yeah. And this year, we're transitioning from 200,000 farmers in the program to 500,000. The budgetary impact on the central government is even greater. So that's a major challenge that we're facing. How to find the funds to support the program. As I say, the Bank of Ghana is coming out with assistance, which we believe will ease the situation for us. But that's the main. And you asked us for one, but you excuse me if I add a second, in terms of challenges. And that is what the Rwandan president referred to, attitudes. I think that is a major challenge, whereby people still continue to look upon agriculture as something that people who don't have anything else to do.
Right, something to escape from.
Something to escape from, and not something which will provide a good life, which will make an important contribution to the development of the society. And I think that that attitudinal change is something that we need to work on systematically so that we can have that performing agriculture that we need. It cannot be right that a continent that has something like, 25% of the world's agricultural land, produces 10% of the world's output of food. These are the disconnects within the African reality, which should give all of us very serious cause for concern. 60% of the jobs on this continent, they're the same in Ghana. Those statistics mirror the Ghanaian reality, are produced by agriculture. At the same time, agriculture's contribution to GDP is somewhere in the region of 32%, continental-wise. Those statistics are the Ghanaian statistics as well. These facts tell us that there has been systematically a failure of policy of being able to look at what we need to do to get out of our situation. My belief continues to be that until we sit down and work out what we need to do, we should stop blaming other people for our problems. Yes, we can't continue. Yeah, we should stop blaming other people for our problems. Accept our reality. Yes, colonialism, imperialism were very distorting, very destabilizing phenomena, but they're past, they've gone. We have to deal with the reality that we find. It's like saying you'd have liked to have been born in the 19th century. You can't. You're born in the 21st century. That's the reality you have to deal with. Sure. We have to deal with the reality of the post-colonial world and find solutions for our situation. And I think that that is what we, the leaders, above all, this has to be our responsibility, finding the solutions that allow our people to get a better life. So this is...
I think that's very well said. I mean, so we've got an audience of people who are potential friends and partners and supporters of this, the donor community, the business community, those foundations who work in this area. I mean, again, if I can turn to you, Sir, Prime Minister of Gabon, if you had a message for, as it were, the community outside as to how they could assist this process of change, what would it be? What are the things that as it were, the constraints that you feel you could do with the right partnerships to overcome?
Well, Mr. Blair, the message I have to pass to the community abroad is quite simple and clear. To understand this message, I have to focus on the need, the necessity to reduce the volume of food imports in Gabon. You know, Gabon, in the 60s, based his development model on agriculture. In the 60s, we were an agricultural country. But starting from the 70s, because we discovered oil, we abandoned the agriculture, and our economy was essentially based on oil. It was a mistake. Nowadays, the momentum is to develop agriculture, and the president is encouraging all people to return to land. The consequence of this model is that Gabon imports almost 90% of its food products. It's huge. And that represents almost $620 million. For a population of 1.8, it's a huge amount. So we have here an opportunity to increase the level of national production. Some very interesting opportunities exist in Gabon, and we do believe that by increasing our national production, we will also encourage export. That means it's important for Gabon and for countries like Ghana, Rwanda, and Kenya to work together to increase the volume of inter-African trade. It's very important. Developing agriculture, going with developing inter-African trade. And let me conclude that, because I know that you don't have enough time to continue to let us elaborating on this very important issue. I have 3 words which has been inspired by introductory speech of President Kagame. As agriculture is a very sensitive issue for African countries, we have to lead, we have to measure, and we have to grow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Deputy President of Kenya. Just on this point of intra-regional trade, yes. I mean, this is obviously something that's extremely important, and President Ghana referenced the Continental Free Trade Agreement. What's necessary to give that the impetus it requires?
Thank you very much. To our partners, friends, whether regional or extra-regional, international, I think the message that we have is we want a win-win engagement. And we want to balance trade between us and our partners, the rest of the world. And that means that we have to get our act together as countries in this continent. And that is exactly what you have said about intra-African trade, intra-regional trade. Because sometimes you want to negotiate. And for argument, you have a population of 10 people, 10 million citizens. You want to negotiate with the EU with 500 million people. That is not a conversation of equals. It doesn't matter how you look at it. And therefore, it becomes very necessary for us to fast-track our regional economic blocks and their integration. And that is why I am very happy that Africa today, with the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, we can have the platform and the muscle to negotiate with the rest of the world on how to balance trade between us and them. As they export engineering, manufactured goods, we must not be exporting unprocessed agricultural products. The discussion we should be having is, right, we are going to accept tractors and cars and machinery, but we are going to export to you finished products of coffee, of tea, of... That is how this is going to be even. But it cannot continue to be you are exporting to us finished products, and you expect us to give you raw materials so that you again process and keep jobs and keep profits and keep on the other side. Then it doesn't become an engagement of equals. It becomes something else, and it becomes unfair. So, and I'm not saying for a moment that anybody is to blame. We have to get our act together. I agree with the President of Ghana that the solution lies with us. Why are we struggling to access a market in Europe when the market is next door? But we have made it, because of our geopolitics, we've made it impossible, or we've made it easier to export to Europe than to export to Uganda, or export to Rwanda, or export to the next door. What is all that about? Sure. You know, and I hope, I believe, and I'm speaking to leaders here in this continent, that we will make it that much more easy, remove the barriers, remove the roadblocks along our borders so that we can trade more, we can travel more. And for the record, Kenya, we have made a policy decision that every African in this continent can come to Kenya and get a visa at the airport. You don't have... Because we cannot trade more with each other if we make it impossible for us to travel across borders or to trace across borders or for services and goods to cross borders. If we make it that much impossible, then all we are talking will be a pipe dream. And so the message I am saying is we have a message for our partners outside this continent, but we have a stronger message for us as Africans.
Good. President Rwanda, it's great. Those are great ambitions to have. Do more of the processing, open up trade between neighbors. What's your scorecard on that at the moment, and how do we improve it?
I have to start by saying that it seems very clear that our minds here on the panel are very well aligned. Gabon, Kenya, Ghana, UK not yet.
No, I was going to say you can come to Europe and give us lessons.
Because, and the main task for us is to make sure that what we are aligned on, as we have discussed, is actually put into practice. We have to implement it. We have talked so much about what best we know we can do to get us to where we want to be. It's several conferences, discussion, it's several meetings, but we still fall short in practice. I think that is the main task we have. Because really, as the points made already, how can we blame anybody else for some of these shortcomings? How can we blame anybody else for Rwanda importing coffee from Europe when we produce coffee, but we don't process it? UK, France, Germany, wherever, you don't grow coffee. You don't grow tea. But why do we have to transport our coffee, our tea, to Europe? You give it some blessing, and then send it. Send it back to us. We pay 10 times more for. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. We've been shipping value for free to the other end, and we pay heavily for, I mean, it just doesn't make sense, and we all know it. So, in fact, earlier as Deputy President William Ruto was saying these things, I remembered at one point I was meeting we were in a meeting, and there was the Vice President of Cote d'Ivoire representing the President. And I was just saying, why don't you produce chocolate for us, and we eat chocolate directly from Ivory Coast?
Yes.
And not from Ghana. And then I even said, you know what, why don't we work together? We look for investments, Rwanda, Cote d'Ivoire, and bring in Ghana, look for this money. Technology will always be found, it is available. And we manufacture, start processing, and stop exporting cocoa beans to, because we can do that. We can, and we need to do it. So, intra-African trade, then the CFTA we have witnessed recently, and what is the meaning if we don't address these things? Yes, we can increase the meaning of that by doing some of these things that we know we can do, that are within. And, well, there will always be people trying to undermine these processes. We should be aware of that. But this is a challenge we should confront and deal with. So, I mean, we should stop having any excuses for not getting things right. And just as all leaders here have said, I'm on board with that.
Sure, absolutely. And Mr. President, you're bound to have strong views on this. So what can be done? And just maybe one interesting thing is, because this is obviously something that is a collective ambition, but we know there's some tough practical challenges in meeting it. What's the role of education in this as well?
I think critical. Yeah. I don't think that...
Because you need the human capital as well, don't you?
Absolutely, it's critical. I think that we have to focus on it, and focus on it in a very determined and systematic manner. Now, just a few examples from my own country. For the last 10 years, until last year, every year an average of some 100,000 Ghanaians, young boys and girls, dropped out of the educational system at the level of junior high school. They have the qualification, but they wouldn't necessarily have the money to be able to pursue education to senior high school, which would mean that in the course of a decade, 1 million young Ghanaians will be thrown into the society, into the labor market with the educational foundation of junior high school level. You know that for this century, that is totally inadequate. Yep. You're not competing just with yourself, you're competing with laborers across the world.
And that impacts on your ability then to deliver the supply chain.
Absolutely. Yep. So we have done, we came to the conclusion that we needed to open up the avenue access to senior high school education. So we've made senior high school education in the public sector in Ghana now free. Last, in September last year, when the policy kicked into effect, 90,000 more Ghanaian students were absorbed into the educational system than the year before. That 100,000 that was dropping out was now going to school. This year, it's 180,000 that are now going to find their way into secondary education. So that is clearly a very important matter that we need to do. But I'd also like to just take on a little bit what President Kagame was saying and Deputy President Ruto, is the practical steps of things that we need to do. The Continental Free Trade Area has been signed by nearly 50 of the 54 African countries. You require 22 of us to ratify it for the agreement to come into effect. Mm-hmm. So that's the challenge. Right. So those of us, everybody's talking about inter-regional trade. Kenya has deposited its instrument of ratification. They did it at the same time as Ghana. A few others have done it. The 22, where are they forthcoming? We ought to interrogate ourselves about where the 22 are, because that is how, very simple, practical step, we can bring it into being. And I think that, I don't think that there's a need for me to elaborate too much all that has been said. But this way of looking at our problems, also in terms of collaboration. For instance, we are now in very active discussions with Morocco. I see the president, the PDG of their phosphate and the fertilizer company is sitting right in front of him. We're talking to him very seriously about collaborating about how now to supply fertilizer at acceptable prices for the Ghanaian market. We don't have to go all kinds of different places in the world. Morocco is just a few hundred kilometers north of us, out there in North Africa. These are the things. Côte d'Ivoire, we've decided that after all these years, Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana produce 65% of the world's output of cocoa. In 2016, the value of the chocolate-related, cocoa-related industry worldwide was over 100 billion United States dollars. Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, 65% responsible for the output. Right. We realized 5.7 billion between us, 5% of the value chain. So, President Ouattara, that's a challenge. Yeah. President Ouattara and I have now come to a formal agreement on paper that we're going to now collaborate and work together to transform the circumstances of our country. But these are, I think, the practical things that we need to do.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. President. Unfortunately, everyone, we've run out of time for this session, but I'd like to say how actually I found it very interesting and indeed inspiring, and that there is an enormous degree of alignment. And the first step to solving a problem is to agree on the analysis of what it is. And I think there is alignment both in that and in some of the solutions. Just a last sort of one-word answer to this question. So as the four of you look ahead, are you optimistic, pessimistic, or in between?
Optimistic.
Very optimistic.
Very optimistic.
I think we're bound to be optimistic. Well, we don't have any option in the matter.
If I may say so, quite apart from your alignment, that optimism, that's also something I can take back when I head back to Europe. So thank you all very, very much indeed for a great panel session.
Thank you, Your Excellencies, for this amazing panel. And I think you've left every single one of us inspired beyond what we could have imagined to be inspired by today. I have to say, although Right Honorable did not ask me about how I'm feeling, I think we're all feeling super, super, uber optimistic after this session. Thank you very much for that. It is even more inspiring and optimistic to hear of what our leadership not only is doing, to hear of what our leadership has done. And we're looking forward to seeing this leadership continue to lead again in the next few years, in the next few decades, so that we can see the products and we can see the results. And hopefully, very soon at next AGRF, we'll all be eating chocolate processed from Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Rwanda together. One of the things that several of your excellencies have raised in your remarks, President Kagame, as well as during the panel, is the need for a mind shift, the need for education, the need to ensure that our youth is also engaged in this process and that our youth is attracted to agriculture, to make agriculture something that is not what you run away from, but something that you run to. That agriculture provides an avenue to make a living, an avenue to have a career, and an avenue to actually create wealth. Given the size of our youth today, it is quite crucial that we do that. At this point in the day, it is quite an honor then to transition into this next panelists from across the continent around agriculture. These are the youth that we're talking about. These are the youth that are starting to really engage in agriculture and to be the leaders of agriculture on the continent today. So without further ado, with your permission, I would like to call on to all the 26 finalists of the AgriHack competition, as well as the organizers of the AgriHack competition, CTA, the AFDB, AGRA, as well as Sogoba. These are youth that come from across Africa, as well as the Caribbean. There are 26 women and men from Benin, Togo, Ghana, Nigeria, Suriname, Uganda, Jamaica, Rwanda, as well as Kenya. and they've been here for the past 3 days participating in the AGRF competition. And to honor them today, I will have to hand over to Mr. Michael Halou, Director of CTA.
Your Excellency President Kagame, Your Excellency President Akufo-Addo, Your Excellency Vice President William Ruto, Your Excellency Prime Minister Emmanuel Izoke Ngombe, Honorable Tony Blair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor and privilege for me to be here with you this afternoon to present the finalists and winners of the 2018 Peach AgriHack competition to such a distinguished audience. We thank you for giving us this honor by being present with us. Please allow me to give you a very short description of the Peach AgriHack competition. It's about being optimistic about young people, being optimistic about technology. It's designed to accelerate digitalization and help modernize and transform African agriculture. The competition has been organized by CTA, the Technical Center for Agricultural Cooperation, in partnership with the African Development Bank and Suguba Africa. Over the years, Peach AgriHack has rewarded and nurtured over 700 young innovators, and in the process created jobs for youth and encouraged growth in the African agri-tech sector. Many of our past winners, some of them are here today, have set up businesses that are serving hundreds of thousands of farmers through e-agriculture. This year we have made a special effort to encourage greater participation of young women with the theme, Women Entrepreneurs Innovate for Agricultural Transformation. As you know, in the technology sector, we have only 10% of women-led startups. It's especially fitting that the competition is taking place here in Kigali, given Rwanda's exemplary leadership in ICT innovation and gender equality. Rwanda recently hosted a major conference on youth entrepreneurship, and as we just heard from His Excellency the President, promoting youth entrepreneurship is a priority for Rwanda. Of the 325 entries, 50% are women, women-led startups, and also more than 50% of the 26 finalists are women. All the 26 finalists, and as well as 10 Rwandan startups, were given 2 days of training on investment readiness this week. This will help all winners, whether they won or not, to build their businesses and attract further investment. So we have 2 categories in this competition. One is for the early stage category, and the second one is the advanced stage category for platforms that are already operational and generating revenue. There are four winners in each of these 2 categories. They will receive grants ranging from 5,000 to 15,000 euros. In 2018, we also have an additional reward for a woman-led startup. The prizes will offer winners valuable opportunities to grow their businesses, and we also continue to offer them with the support and capacity building and networking for the next year or so. Before announcing the winners, I would like to recognize the tireless work of our international panel of 5 expert judges, including Professor Ruth Onyango, who is the Africa Food Prize Laureate of 2017. I think Ruth is around here. I would also like to recognize the support that we have received from the European Union, AGRA, and the African Development Bank, as well as other partners, including Impact Hub Kigali and Women in Tech Africa. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to announce the winners of the 2018 Peach AgriHack competition. So in the first category, early stage, I would like to ask Dr. Martin Fregeni of AFDB to give out the prizes. So in the early stage category, the first winner is Illunium Greenhouse Kenya. Welcome. Second, Feno Packaging, Benin. Third, Develop Digitally, Jamaica. And fourth, Farmigate Company, Nigeria. He's not here. We have Mr. somewhere. Okay, in the advanced stage category, I will ask Dr. Leonard Mizzi of the European Commission to give out the prizes. The top winner is Cow Tribe Africa from Ghana. Runner-up, Agro Innova, Ghana. Third place, Ancora Global Services, Nigeria. And fourth, Clean Sarlu, agribusiness from Togo. Last but not least, we have a winner of the women-only category that will be given by Soguba Africa, Mr. Isam Chelu. The winner is Fenu Packaging from Benin. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating our winners and the finalists, because the finalists will also continue to benefit from this program and for this 2018 Peach AgriHub. Thank you very much for your. So please wait. I think we are asking. Picture.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of the organizers, and as well as all the youth who participated, who first applied, who were selected, who came through and have spent time building their projects. And as Michael Helu said, they're all winning an accompaniment, support, continuing to develop their programs. Congratulations to all of you. We're now coming to the third part of our program, where we'll be hearing from a few organizations, as well as a representative of the ministers that are in the room, that will be talking to us about key action points, how we're moving forward from this AGRF, and where is it taking us from here. To start with, without taking too much time, initially we had planned for a panel, but I will ask each of them to come on stage to give a few remarks to take us forward to the end of this summit. I will start with Gilbert Humbo, the president of IFAD, who I will welcome to come up and give his few remarks. Mr. Humbo.
Merci beaucoup. Excellency Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda, Your Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo, President of the Republic of Ghana, Excellency William Ruto, Deputy President of Kenya, Excellency Emmanuel Izoze Ngode, Prime Minister of the Republic of Gabon, all distinguished guests, honorable ministers, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first start by thanking the AGRF organizers for inviting us, particularly inviting me to be part of this presidential summit, and also to join all of us in congratulating AGRA for a very well organized summit. Particularly, and I just cannot help it, by really welcoming the focus on the smallholders, producers in the continent, and also encouraging all of us, including the smallholders, to grow. I think it is important for us to remind ourselves that the smallholder agriculture remains an important employer in Africa. Nearly 70% of Africans are involved in holding of less than 2 hectares. Secondly, the number of youth, of our youngsters aged between 15 and 24 is expected to top up 350 million by 2035, more than double as compared to 2010. Third, the post-harvest food losses are estimated to cost 4 billion a year. And this amount of food lost could indeed feed 48 million people. Last point is the combined food and beverage market in sub-Saharan Africa, which is expected to reach 1 trillion by 2030, i.e. more than 3 times its value today. Clearly, this shows that we do have opportunities for agribusiness in Africa, and transforming small farm into sustainable agribusinesses hold out the promise of employment for African youth, while at the same time reducing poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. Obviously, and we heard from our leaders earlier, this is easy to say and trickier to implement. We still have the low productivity challenges, the whole climate change, the limited access to rural finance, access to markets, and the price volatilities, and so forth. And yet, we know that if we have this mind change, this change of attitude that was referred to earlier by the panel, we can make it. I just want to use the floor, if it's for one thing, to make a plea for all of us. We have, in each of our responsibility, implemented successful initiative, successful project. Let's just commit ourselves to scale up what is currently working, what we know it has been working, just scaling up to create job and create employment. I just want to take one example here in Rwanda, where we have been working with the government, particularly the Minister of Agriculture and farmers, cooperatives, to reduce the post-harvest losses by at least 20% through better drying, processing, and storage, and so forth. In Uganda, also, for example, working with the European Commission, we again set up a fund that we call the Uganda Small and Medium Agribusiness Development Fund. Based on the success that we have been noticing on those 2 projects, and in discussion with a lot of partners, since we talk about alliances, AGRA, European Commission, and some bilateral, we have created in December the ABC Capital Fund, Agribusiness Capital Fund, where we want to specifically target financing directly the youth in sub-Saharan Africa, as much as it's concerned in rural farm and non-farm businesses. And we expect by the early part of 2019 to be able to start the operation. So IFAD will certainly continue to spend 50% of our resources in Africa, and we have committed ourselves to increase by 10% in 2019. For the period of 2019 to 2021, we expect in the vicinity of 3.5 billion, out of which 50% will be in Africa. Thank you again for inviting us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Umbo, for these words and these cautions and encouraging and pushing to do more. Without much introduction, because she doesn't need very much introduction, I would like to invite also for a few remarks Vera Songwe, the Executive Secretary of UNECA.
Your Excellency President Paul Kagame, the President of the Republic of Rwanda, Your Excellency President Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo, President of Ghana, Your Excellency William Ruto, Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya, Right Honorable Emmanuel Isoze Ngonde, Prime Minister of Gabon, distinguished gentlemen, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the First Lady of Rwanda as well, Your Excellencies, thank you for being here. My job today is to talk about the CFTA and the importance of the CFTA to agriculture. Before I start, I want to first of all congratulate Dr. Agnes Kalibata for an amazing, I think, conference focusing on agriculture. Thank you very much for having us here today. Coming from the UN, I cannot continue to speak without paying tribute to somebody who should have been here with us as well, His Excellency, Mr. Kofi Annan, who, of course, is the one who put agriculture on the agenda, but also began to lay the groundwork for the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Today, when we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, we say that we will never achieve them if Africa does not achieve them. And we know that Africa will not achieve the Sustainable Development Goals if we don't do well in agriculture. So it all comes together, and we would like to pay tribute to his memory for that. I finally want to just congratulate IITA again for winning the food prize and making sure that we ensure that research is on the agenda. Now I'm going to focus on three things: macroeconomics of agriculture, trade, and how trade impacts agriculture, and finally, gender, women, and markets. Why do I start with the macroeconomics of agriculture? Today, as we talk about growth and as we talk about agriculture, we know that one of the direct impacts for agriculture is financing. And we know that as countries get into difficult macroeconomic situations, interest rates go up, financing dries up, and the first places that it hits are small lenders and small holder farmers. So it is important for any basis for sustainable agriculture for the macroeconomics to work. And I think that as we do public investment, and it is now very clear that public investment that is done, which is not complemented by an effective private sector enabling environment, does not deliver the kind of growth that is needed to ensure that agriculture fosters. So the first thing that we must do is ensure that agriculture and the macro and public investments that go into agriculture are sustainable and efficient. And this brings us to the CFTA, because public investment only brings value and greater value if it is complemented by trade and foreign direct investment. That is why when we talk about the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, and we talk about it with such euphoria, it is because we know that today our leaders are leading with public investment. And they have added to that leadership the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. Trade is a driver of growth. But more importantly, when we trade in agriculture, it is not only a driver of growth, but it's a driver of growth from the bottom up. So it is a more inclusive growth. And that is why when you combine agriculture and trade, you have the kind of growth that we need in Africa, which is inclusive and sustainable growth. Another common characteristic of the research that we have done at the Economic Commission for Africa shows that SMEs and the growth of the SME sector is responsible for all sustainable growth and development world over. So you need at least 65% of your businesses to be from the SME sector. That is the case for Africa's agriculture if we do it sustainably. Therefore, we are standing, I think as our leaders have already said, in the middle of all the ingredients we need. Governments that are increasing public investment, an African continent that has just signed a free trade area agreement and is increasing and attracting more private sector investment. So why then are we still falling behind on agriculture? And I think this is where our leaders have already talked about it enough, but maybe to use a few numbers so that we can start to measure and see where we end up when we meet again. I would like to just put a few numbers up to show us what we can do more and why is the CFTA so important. The CFTA is important for a number of reasons. The first is that it's going to increase our markets. We have a market of 1.2 billion people, and if we are able to trade across borders, then every woman on the continent can sell her goods from Rwanda to Zimbabwe and from Zimbabwe to Algeria in a seamless fashion. I just want to ask a question. Does anybody know what was the cost of the sale of Whole Foods to Amazon later last year? Can anybody give me the number? Whole Foods to Amazon. $13.7 billion. $13.7 billion was the price that a food company, a high school dropout, who created a market for selling organic foods, sold his company for. So if there was ever any doubt that getting into agriculture, getting into the agriculture business can make you money, I think when you hear the number 13.7 billion, you should get in. And if you're a youngster, if you're the youth, Amazon.com, which is a tech company, clearly with Amazon.com, with a valuation of $1 trillion buying Google, they are telling us something. The food market will remain the biggest market in the world, and Africa is the biggest producer if we got our markets right. And this is the second point I want to talk about. It's markets. What are we doing on the front of markets, and how well are we doing with the CFTA? Intra-Africa trade for food stands at 17%. So we're doing much better than intra-Africa trade in total. And I must thank the Prime Minister of Gabon, because a lot of the food in Gabon comes from Cameroon. So we're doing some work on that front, and we're doing it well. And we should do more. But we could do better, and we could do more, and we could do faster. However, the markets do not work efficiently. And I think one of the biggest issues, as I think the Prime Minister of the UK asked, what are the impediments to the CFTA? The biggest impediment to the CFTA is the logistics of it. It's how we move goods across borders. Let me show you some numbers on how we move goods across borders quickly. And this is the doing business indicators. And we look at trading across borders on the continent and how well we're doing. And this is something we could measure and something we could come back to next year and see how well we've done. Morocco, trading across borders, the time to trade across borders is about 19 hours. South Africa, 100 hours. We just all came from China, 26 hours. Rwanda, of course, 97. Mauritius, 48. So we can do it. And I think this is what the CFTA is aiming for us to start doing. Once we have ratified, once we have signed, we need to start moving goods across borders. We need to improve on the logistics, but we also need to improve on the way our markets work. I think one of the things that we have talked a lot about today is the inputs and the subsidies that we bring into the agriculture sector. an important part of the agriculture sector is making those markets work. We've talked a lot about agriculture subsidies for fertilizer, seed subsidies. We cannot create an agribusiness sector if we subsidize across the board. It becomes regressive, and it becomes impossible to grow markets in those circumstances. That is one of the reasons why at ECA we are beginning to work on how can you segment markets to ensure that those who need subsidized fertilizer get subsidized fertilizer, but those who can afford it no longer get the subsidy, so that the state can put those resources into other areas that are needed. That is a very important part, I think, of the agriculture market on the continent today. So which markets we price correctly and which markets we price with a subsidy, because there will always be markets that we price with a subsidy. In closing, women. I wanted to put back the slide on the time it takes to export. Most of the work on the agriculture sector is done by women. We know today that women basically make up 45% of the agriculture sector, but their productivity is 30% less than the productivity of men in the agriculture sector. This is for 3 reasons. The first one is because they don't own their assets. They do not own the land. And I think we need to start measuring it to ensure that as we come to more Agra forums, we begin to name the countries where women cannot own land or do not own it reliably. This is the bedrock of growing Africa's agriculture. We must allow women to own land. We know today that in Rwanda, we're sitting in Rwanda, women can own land. A second point is basically there is a lot of idle land on the continent. We can actually begin to tax idle land to get revenue to build the infrastructure that is needed. The second part about women's access to land, and I go back to the macroeconomics, is that women are the ones who have the most difficult time getting access to finance. So they end up going to the banking sector. And if you have inflation, because your macroeconomic situation does not work, then again, you have high rates of access to financing for women. So bringing all that together, the CFTA, and the final point, I think, with the CFTA is Africa now has one market. Africa has a 1.2 billion market. Africa can actually grow, produce, and market within the continent. When we talk about Africa being food reliable and food sustainable, it doesn't only mean that Gabon should now produce all the tomatoes that it imports from Cameroon. It also means that Gabon can start producing asparagus. So basically, we know that when Africa trades with itself, and we have done a lot of work on this at ECA, Africa increases value, Africa diversifies its economy even faster, and Africa increases prosperity. Because we also know that it's very difficult to immediately export to the EU and to the United States because of standards, what we do when we trade with ourselves, when Ghana trades with Kenya, Ghana perfects its commodities so that in the next stage, Ghana can go from Kenya to the United States. And I think this is an important part of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. The reason we insist that the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, and I think that Prime Minister Ruto could not have said it any better, is Africa needs to come together. With a 1.2 billion market, we can actually have a negotiating position that is important, that is viable when we have partners across from us. But it is even more important when we trade with ourselves if we can improve on the Doing Business Index, because we become more competitive. And as we become more competitive, we create more jobs. It is even more important that we trade with ourselves because we need the raw commodities to process the goods. The president of Ghana spoke about cocoa. I think we need to begin to work on warehouse receipts. We need to make the warehouse receipts bill effective in many of our countries for us to be able to price our cocoa and price our commodities right. Today, a lot of our commodities are priced in markets that are out of the continent. The Continental Free Trade Area Agreement will allow us to be able to price those commodities because we're pricing them in the right scale at a price that is viable for the continent. I was to talk about the CFTA and why the CFTA is important. It is particularly important because our leaders are finally beginning to lead on this issue. In a year when we are renegotiating different trade agreements, I think it is important that all of us go back to our countries, and especially the youth, ask our leaders, starting with Gabon, have you ratified the CFTA? We need 22. We need Gabon to join the club that is sitting up within us today. I think Ghana has, Rwanda has. of course, Kenya has. So maybe Gabon will join us in that countdown to getting 22. Thank you very much.
And we shall be celebrating at the next AGRF the fact that all 22 would have signed by then. Thank you, Ms. Songwe. The last key remarks that we will have before the communique of AGRF, as well as the closing and thanks before we leave here, under the leadership of our heads of state, those that are actually driving the agricultural transformations are ministers of agriculture with other actors in place. There has been an amazing number of ministers of agriculture during this AGRF that have been working together, working hard, and working in sharing those policies, sharing those challenges, and sharing the successes. To talk to us from a minister's perspective and as a representative of the different ministers that have been here, I would like to call on Minister Ogbem, the Minister of Agriculture of the Republic of Nigeria, to give us a few words. And at His Excellency's request, may I have all the ministers that are here to come and stand with him. Thank you.
I need them behind me to give me courage. Your Excellency, President Paul Kagame, Your Excellency, the President of Ghana, Your Excellency, the Deputy President of Kenya, and Your Excellency, the Prime Minister of Gabon, and former Prime Minister Tony Blair, the honorable ministers and organizers of this conference, I've been asked to carry out this assignment on behalf of the ministers. If you want to know why, look closely at my head. You'll find some gray material there, which gives evidence of a certain amount of longevity in public service. Following the proceedings of this forum, I'd like to make, on behalf of the ministers, a commitment to advance evidence-based leadership in our shared agricultural agenda. I would also like to ask my fellow ministers to strengthen their resolve, as all of us have agreed to commit to continue driving results and impacts in our national and regional agricultural systems through the CAADP biannual review process. In particular, we commit to utilizing the results of biennial review report and the Africa Transformation Scorecard and Dashboard to trigger evidence-based planning and informed implementation of Malabo-compliant national agriculture investment plans. We recognize the central challenges emerging from the current biennial review, namely access to affordable credit, where we must all push to one-digit interest rates as we are prioritizing in Nigeria, and as the President of Ghana said, is a program the Central Bank of Ghana is embarking upon. We recognize the need for access to improved technologies and seed and such other inputs that will make agricultural production meet the standards we require. We recognize the need to strengthen extension services and the increased use of mechanization and empowerment of youth and women in agricultural production. And for this reason, we commit to improve evidence-based and informed policy and decision-making leading to agricultural transformation across Africa. We will also contribute our individual and collective leadership to improve national and regional data systems. And we want to remind all of us that the most powerful legislative chamber in the world is the stomach. God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, for that and for those commitments, things that we will continue to measure and to monitor. At the end of every major forum, one of the, beyond what each of us gain from it, beyond the networks, beyond the connections, beyond the lessons, something does come out of it. And AGRF in particular, that focuses on making sure that it produces results, that it's not just a shop talk, but that it happens and it drives actual transformation on the continent. I would like, on that note, to invite Dr. Kalibata to come tell us a few key points from the AGRF communique and things that have come out of the 3 days. Dr. Kalibata.
Excellencies, heads of state and government, Excellency First Lady of Rwanda, Excellencies former heads of state and government, honorable ministers, ladies and gentlemen, I plan to keep this very short. I thank you for the time you've been with us, and I'll keep it very short. I'll not read the declaration. I'll tell you the key issues and elements that will feed into the declaration. As we end the conference, this conference today, there are two general agreements. One, that the AGRF here in Kigali, 2018 AGRF, has been the biggest, the best, and Kigali has set a new bar. All countries after here are going to have to measure themselves against Kigali. The second general agreement is that with leadership that is committed to what we are looking to do in agriculture, that is committed to performance and tracking performance, there's no way we cannot grow and we cannot see our economies grow. At the beginning of the forum, Your Excellencies, we had commitments from last year's AGRF as we've made it a culture. The EU stepped forward and talked about their 2017 commitments in Ivory Coast, breaking down what they will be doing going forward. Germany stepped forward and talked about the work they are doing under One World, No Hunger, and the compact with Africa. Those details will appear in the reports. We had 3 new initiatives that are very important. We had a coalition formed with 35 institutions around the fall armyworm to ensure that we drive the eradication of the fall armyworm. We had a coalition formed led by the World Bank around small-scale irrigation, recognizing that climate change is not going to go away, and we need to do something to ensure that every farmer is equipped to deal with climate change. There was also an initiative, work that has been going on but was announced here, from the GEF, $4.5 billion, 500 million of which that will be spent on this continent to deal with environmental issues, including climate change. So, Your Excellencies, like I said, I'll keep it short. In conclusion, we agreed that we would drive agribusiness investments with a focus on removing barriers to women accessing finance. We've agreed on driving interregional trade, building on the continental trade agreement that was signed by our heads of state. We agreed that evidence-based leadership is going to guide us going forward, anchored in the agricultural scorecard that our heads of state have just committed to, and that our ministers have just committed to. I want to conclude by quoting a quote. We cannot fall short on implementation. Because when we do, we have nobody else but ourselves to blame. President Kagame, AGRF 2018. Thank you very much.
We have unfortunately come to the part that I don't want us to come to. And that means the vote of thanks and farewell from Dr. Geraldine Mukeshimana. And the reason I don't want this part to start is because it means we have to leave. And I do not want to leave. President Kagame said we can stay a little bit longer. I don't want to stay a little bit longer. I want to stay a lot longer. Thank you for your hospitality. The Minister of Agriculture, the Republic of Rwanda.
Your Excellencies, Heads of States and Government, Your Excellency, the First Lady of Rwanda, distinguished delegates, dear friends and colleagues. As we conclude, my job is very easy, just to thank you. On behalf of the government of Rwanda and the people of Rwanda, I just want to express our heartfelt appreciation to you all for being part of this forum. We have enjoyed and benefited from the discussions, and thank you so much for the work that you are doing, how you are leading, and how you are going to lead from now on. I would also like to extend our special gratitude to the AGRF partners and sponsors for supporting the forum's mission and for making this event possible. I also want to thank my fellow Rwandans and the colleagues from AGRA for working tirelessly to ensure that this event was successful. We have heard from our leaders, they are getting to be optimistic. So we depart challenged to go forth and put the vision of this whole week into actions. All of us, we have a role to secure the wealth of our nations. We must continue to lead, measure, and grow. We now, I hear we have a short video to remind us of the call to this action. I guess all of you now, you know Murakoze. Thank you.
If I don't start with good seeds, all my hard work will have little impact. I need high-yield seeds.
Well, the flagship program of the government is what we call Planting for Food and Jobs.
The Rockefeller Foundation in Africa will continue to support government to deliver the agricultural transformation we need.
I need financing. More money for me equals better returns for everyone.
I'm providing finance and de-risking.
I need better market access to simplify the process of finding buyers of what I produce.
The Africa Enterprise Challenge Fund is all about empowering rural communities to access regional and global markets in agriculture.
I need you
to take the lead and ensure that Africa's agriculture shifts into thriving agribusinesses.
How will you lead?
Et vous, quel modèle de leadership serez-vous?
How will you lead?
How will you lead?
我们如何引领?
How will you lead?
How will you lead?
How will you lead?
How will you lead? We're looking towards each and every one of us and asking ourselves that question. And the challenge of making these commitments in front of 2,000 people is that there's 2,000 people that heard you, and that next time you meet again, those same 2,000 people will be asking you, how did you lead in the past year? So on that note, I would like to take this opportunity to really thank everybody, especially our host. Thank you for welcoming us to the point that we don't want to leave. Thank you for the leadership across the continent that has shown us how will they lead. We're looking towards you, and we are looking forward to leading also in our spheres of influence behind you. This has been amazing. Thank you to AGRA and to AGRF and all the partners for doing that. I will not repeat the vote of thanks. I will just ask you to please allow us to let our guests of honor depart. So if you would please stand and thank our heads of states and our heads of government to depart under your applause through this door for the photo op with the laureates. Thank you so much, Your Excellencies. And I'll take this opportunity to announce that there will be a press conference in this room in the next few minutes for the media that is here. There will be the Minister of Agriculture of Rwanda, Dr. Kalibata, President of AGRA, and the President of IFAD. And on that note, thank you very much. President Kagame has said, go discover Kigali. Thank you very much for an excellent forum. Enjoy yourselves. Bye.